Today's lecture is on form and organization because audiences expect and deserve well-formed, well-organized speeches. This lecture will focus on the importance of form and organization in developing understanding and in conveying meaning to others. Future lectures will target specific organizational techniques used in public speaking. Humans have been intrigued with the idea of form throughout the ages. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato thought form and organization were so important that he believed that there must be a world of perfect form and order beyond what we see in the everyday world around us. In our day and age, we idealize forms that we find around us. For example, children's stories begin with "Once upon a time" and end with "and they all lived happily ever after," to conform to perfect order of what relationships are supposed to be. We look for symmetry in art forms. We find pleasure in symmetrical architecture and in harmonious music. We find meaning in familiar forms, whether they sketch simple outlines, supply very few details, or offer rich, luxurious detail. Well-organized, familiar forms help us both provide meaning and derive understanding. Now, let's look at something that's not organized. There's quite a lot of stuff on this slide, but none of the individual pieces are difficult to understand. Now, imagine this is a blank sheet of paper, and I wanted you to draw on this slide what you saw on the last slide. Could you do it? Most of us probably couldn't, and the main reason is that it wasn't well organized. Let's look at it again. We see curved and straight black lines and also a bunch of dots arranged in some lines, but there's no symmetry, little if any organization, and consequently it is hard to assign meaning to this slide, which makes it difficult to remember. Let's start organizing this piece by piece. First, we want to take the curved line inside the red circle and match it up with the indicated piece. Then, if we rotate it 90 degrees, we get the letter G. We see this as one unitary letter G, the seventh letter of the alphabet. But if we look at it closer, we will notice that it is actually made up of several smaller parts. Notice the large curved line, circled in blue, intersects with two small straight lines, circled in red. The lower straight line intersects with another straight line, also circled in red. So why do we see only one letter G when there are in fact at least four objects here? There's one curved line and three small straight lines. The answer is each piece fits together in a meaningful way and essentially loses its individual identity and becomes part of the larger whole. One item, the letter G, instead of four separate parts. Next, we take two of the semicircles in the original diagram and push them together. When we then place them next to our G, we come up with the word go. Adding the second object again leaves us with a unitary object, in this case a word. This doesn't in any way change the G. Now it forms part of the sound of the word go. If we push together the remaining semicircles and add them to the word go, we get a new word, goo. Notice how this changes the sound of the first O. Again, however, we don't see this as three objects, but as one word. We can then push two more of the pieces together and add them to the end of the word to get good. Again, the sound of the O's change, even though the old pattern is physically unaltered. The letters now are subsumed under the single entire word good. There's a straight line in our original slide. Let's add it underneath the word good. That doesn't seem to create a problem, but it also doesn't seem to add any meaning. Now what if we space things out? Is there a different meaning in this? How about if we add all of those dots from the original slide? Do you see a face? What was formerly a meaningless line now appears to be a mouth. The G and the D are now ears. The O's are eyes. We expect complex things to be more difficult to grasp than simple ones. But notice that as we added the new objects in each of the last several slides, they were about equally easy to recognize and remember, even though each was more complex than the one preceding it. This violates our expectations and confirms that whenever possible, we tend to see familiar patterns as unitary wholes rather than a collection of parts. As we saw earlier with the butterfly and flower examples, even if some elements are left out of a well-known pattern, we still tend to perceive the pattern itself rather than the constituent parts. This isn't a whole face, but our mind fills in what is missing and recognizes it as a face. Difficulty of recognition and recall depend more upon the number of whole patterns rather than upon the number of individual elements. Ramifications for you as a public speaker are that people remember things that are developed in discernible and recognizable patterns better than those in random arrangements. The next time we meet, we will talk about some specific organizational patterns for informative and persuasive speeches. Thank you.